This episode is sponsored by Loaida Ayahuasca Retreat. Loaida is the highest rated ayahuasca retreat in South America, with over 600 five-star reviews on Google. Loaida combines authenticity, accessibility, and affordability. You'll experience powerful, authentic ceremonies led by indigenous shamans in a stunning venue located just 1 hour from Medellin in Colombia. Surrounded by nature, yet with comforts like hot water and Wi-Fi, it's the perfect place to connect, heal, and grow. Loaida's team has guided more than 2,000 people through life-changing transformations, and they keep it affordable with retreats starting at just $645. Whether you're coming for healing, clarity, or a deeper connection to yourself, Loaida is the best choice. If it is your first time drinking ayahuasca, you will love Loaida's 3.5-hour preparation course and integration support, all included in the price. And if you mention the Universe Within podcast, they will offer you a free bodywork session during your stay. Sam Believ is the founder. I interviewed him on episode 166 of the podcast, and he's a really good guy with a good heart. So if you'd like more information, visit loaida.com to book your retreat or to learn more, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes. On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Alisa Reimer. Alisa was recommended to me by a listener of this podcast. I had a look over her work, and I think I knew almost right away that she'd be a really good guest. I think she's actually had quite a similar life. We talked about her background growing up in East Germany, and as she puts it, the influence her grandmother had on her, opening her to what she describes as this invisible world, or we could even say shamanic world. We talked about her time in South America. Or Latin America. She originally went to Mexico to study, and then that really kind of sparked an interest in different indigenous traditional cultures, how she's become, as she says, a cross-cultural educator about these different traditions. We spoke about a lot of these traditions of the temazcal in Mexico, working with sound, certain Andean cosmovisions, and just a lot about these topics of actual cosmovision, of what that means, of concepts like prayer and dreams. I think she's done some amazing work, and she has a lot of wisdom. It was really a pleasure for me to sit down and speak with her, and I think and trust you all will get a lot of this interview. As always, if you're able to support the podcast, it's a really big help to me. Patreon is a beautiful website. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. I also like the idea of a website like that because, as we spoke about in the podcast, it also works on this idea of reciprocity. So if you feel like you're gaining something from this podcast, it's a really beautiful way to give back. And if not, as always, just supporting the algorithm. So if you're viewing this, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, and if you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. I think that's it. I'm shooting these quite far in advance, so probably when this is released, we will already be into or finished with our dieta in Ireland, although we're actually sold out of that one already. But we did just release our upcoming dietas. We have a remote dieta we're doing end of August, and we have our final dieta of the year in the Sacred Valley of Peru, beginning at November 2nd, I believe, and we do still have spaces for those. So if you're interested in this work, my work, and also working with my colleague Merav Artzi, you can find out more information on my website at nicotianarustica.org. So that's it for the intro, and without further ado, here's my conversation with Alisa.
Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze, run out of the maze today.
Thank you very much for coming on. We were briefly chatting before we started, and a listener of my podcast reached out, and he had very high words about you, and I checked out your Instagram page and website, and I think you're really a perfect fit for this podcast. It's really, I think all of the things you work on, sound and shamanism and ancestral wisdom and knowledge and cultural bridging, it's really the essence of this podcast. So I think we'll have a really fascinating conversation. I would actually imagine some of the guests listening have heard of you, or maybe they're familiar with you. Who knows? Maybe they've even worked with you. But I'd imagine a large portion also hasn't. So maybe just to start, I know it's always a big question, but if you can just speak a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of what led you in life to be doing the thing that you're doing now.
Thank you so much, Jason, for inviting me and for trusting and for opening the space for this conversation. I'm also very curious what will unfold. And so for me, I think my journey has started very early in my childhood, actually. My grandmother introduced me to, what I like to call the invisible worlds. We would be in the forest and she would, show me, like, look at this tree and can you see this being there or this spirit, more so referring to natural objects and formations and things, and seeing beyond the materiality and really seeing something that is alive inside of that. And we would paint together and do all kinds of creative practices. And I think it was really her that introduced me to there's so much more than what is visible on the first sight. And I guess this is also what created this impulse when I was 18 to go to Mexico on my own. I was really following this intuitive pulse and went there for a summer to work there or do an internship in a local editorial office for a newspaper in Oaxaca City. And I fell so deeply in love with the country that I thought about it every day and decided later to study there as well. And a few years later, in the beginning of my 20s, I studied at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, the incredible university in Mexico City, which is one of the best ones in Latin America. It's also free and just incredible space of knowledge and cultural appreciation and depth and richness. So anyone who is considering to study abroad, I highly recommend this. It's just incredible. And there I also had Indigenous professors. I studied Latin American studies and drama. And later I traveled through the whole country and looking for these threads that are so alive there. This is what really brought me there, the knowing that the magic, the unseen, everything is woven into everyday life there, and I needed to be part of it, and I needed to explore it, and I needed to be in a field where this is still alive and everyone is kind of seeing it and aware of it. So this is what brought me there and really helped me to anchor it into my reality in this amplified cultural field. And I also met many medicine people there, and people from original cultures in Mexico, in the country, in the desert, in the jungle. So this opened a lot. And when I came back to Berlin, I was certain that I have to dedicate my whole self to it. And I was studying cultural studies in Berlin and Humboldt University and history. And I finished my bachelor thesis on psychomagic from Alejandro Jodorowsky, which was a very great way to get deeper into ritual theory and how to bring it together with artistic practice, performative ways. And I started to work with sound as well. And I think, it was all very intuitive. I always played piano and worked, with that. But I realized that sound for me is a way to create contemporary, genuine forms of rituals and bring all this knowledge together and these experiences, and create experiences that are beyond words or cultures, where we can all come into this resonant field together. So this, I've been very consistent in this practice. I later did my master thesis as well on a very interesting topic, which I'm happy to mention later. So for me, it's all about entering the invisible worlds through also discourse, cultural research, and sound experiences, rituals, to reawaken also our own ancestral memory. And I'm very grateful to have incredible teachers and allies on this path, as I'm working with different knowledge holders from mainly Latin America, and being that bridge between those worlds. I hope that gives a little summary.
So that's really interesting that you said your grandmother was the first person to kind of open your eyes. I think the last interview that I released on this podcast was with a really interesting guy. His name is Michael Amster. He's actually a medical doctor, but he wrote a book called The Power of Awe. Awe being like this sense of awe, this sense of wonder. And it was really interesting because, I guess it's always hard to exactly know how people procure certain statistics and things, but he was saying, and I don't disbelieve it, that in places like North America and Europe, from what they measured, they were the societies that had the least amount of awe. And I think one of the things a lot of these shamanic paths really connect us to is this sense of awe. And I think a lot of that is connected to the natural world. And I think often, because in these more kind of Western societies, we tend to live more and more in cities, and we are disconnected from kind of the magic or the wonder, the awe of nature. A lot of people really suffer. And I think that is one of the callings that people are kind of being redrawn to these shamanic paths. But it's really interesting that you said your grandmother was very connected to that, because I think for a lot of people, we have become so disconnected to that. And it's very kind of antithetical to our quote unquote Western cosmovision that we can communicate with trees, or that a rock is maybe alive, or that if we really go into nature, the woods, and listen, that there can potentially be a connection, a dialogue, something that we can tune into. Do you know like more about your grandmother, or like her past, her story that kind of allowed her to have that sort of a worldview?
Yeah, I guess my grandmother was also kind of a bridge builder. She was, working. She had a very like mind-oriented work. It being, I have to think about the word in English to be honest, but she was an engineer for machines. So she was from East Germany, and so this whole kind of engineering, of course, very materialistic worldview, very rational, very clear, very linear. But on the other hand, she was an incredible artist. And also, I think what really opened her to the invisible worlds was also the depression that she was suffering from. So all these artistic practices were her way to alchemize and process. And I guess her having this non-ordinary perception of reality that really opened her so beautifully and made her this incredible, quirky, funny being, also was connected to the suffering that she experienced. And I was with her as well when she had episodes, and it was really hard to experience. But she was definitely a very free-minded being, and that opened me. I guess we orientate ourselves on our parents and surrounding as children, and when you have this one crazy one in the family, And I don't say crazy in a pejorative way, I say it in general, right? Also, she was incredibly funny and just hilarious. That really shows you, okay, this is a way of being in this world as well. And I resonate with that. And we had our frequency that we would drop in together. Actually, also, we both said that we were our soulmates. I don't know how much I knew what this word would mean when I was young, but it was just clear. We would communicate on a very specific level and build our own little worlds in the garden and create little houses and paint and just be fully in this other world, in this other reality, and fully understand each other. And yeah, the more I think about it now, even speaking about it, I'm just so grateful because especially as a child living or growing up in an industrialized context, you need support to nourish this and to open these doors.
What was it that made you or that called you to Mexico specifically? Had you like known something about it, or like you were studying Spanish? I mean, I think maybe less so these days, but I would imagine when that was quite a jump from going from East Germany to Oaxaca of all places.
Absolutely. Actually, yesterday I sat in a temazcal in a sweat lodge. It was an incredibly strong one with the teacher of my teachers who came from Mexico with his daughter. And I was suddenly feeling the strong prayer of gratitude to Mexico because I was like, wow, this really was the field of amplification that led me to where I am now. And first of all, I want to say this now, it's not to your question, but I feel it's relevant. The way that I was received there, this openness by the people, was just so incredibly generous and graceful. And now I go back all the time as well, and I see how much Mexico is changing because everyone is like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Let's go to Mexico, building lives. And that's great. But I had this strong prayer last night that, yeah, we can all, like, going to these places, just, perceive this openness and gratitude and also build lives and realities that are in coherence with the local people and allow them to live a graceful life as well, because the disparities right now in Mexico City are really incredible, and it costs like a lot of heaviness to witness that. And so I went there when I was 18. It was something very intuitive. It almost came from the invisible worlds. And especially growing up with a family from East Germany, they weren't allowed to travel only in communist countries. So traveling wasn't like a big thing. And even going to Latin America is like unimaginable. I mean, I'm born in 1991, so after the wall came down. But still, back in the day, I aspired to be a journalist, and I started when I was 17 to work for local newspapers, etc. And I wanted to, I was researching and checking if there's a way to do an internship in an editorial office. And then I found Mexico, and I was like, this is it. I will just go there. My parents and family wasn't like incredibly happy about that because, of course, there's a lot of what you see in the news and everything is not really that you want to send your 18-year-olds there. But I was certain I have to go there, and they let me do it. And yes, I spoke Spanish already. I learned it in school because I spent a lot of time in Spain my whole life, in summers always. So this is why I went there. And yesterday in the temazcal, I was even like, just giving also of feeling so grateful that I did that. And I mean, you take different decisions when you're 18 or 21 than when you're in the beginning of your 30s or 40s. And something came that was like, this trust that I had back then, this inner knowing, may I never lose it, but integrate it with the maturity that I'm having now, and always come back to this thread of following this intuitive call and this whispering from the unseen.
You mentioned you studied drama when you were in university in Mexico City. It's something that's interesting because I think a lot of people don't necessarily correlate, like, for example, the work you're doing now to something like drama. And yet, even I think if you look at a lot of, like in the West, we tend to trace our roots back to Greek civilization. And even in those cultures, there was often something about the performer, the actor, that field of drama that was also trying to touch an unseen world. It was, this idea of becoming something, putting on a mask, trying to touch some ephemeral feeling, trying to invoke something from the audience. There was, actually something very divine, and even in a lot of those cultures, it was seen as somehow connected to religion, to spirit. Is that something you've ever thought about at all, or that kind of whatever it was that not only drew you to Mexico but also drew you to that aspect of drama and what that entails?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think why I chose that, because it wasn't really easy to study two different things. I had to, this university is incredibly bureaucratic as well. But before I went, I was also, working at local theaters in Berlin, like doing internships and stuff at Maxim Gorki, for example, in the center of Berlin. And it just called me. For me, it's also magic what happens on stage. And again, it was very intuitive, knowing that I want to do that. Especially, makes actually not so much sense because I was working in journalism at that time. But I did it, and I'm incredibly grateful, because what we did in drama in Mexico City was, wow, we went through 2 traditional dramas every week that we had to read. So imagine reading Shakespeare, etc. in Spanish. Didn't work for me. So I asked my mom, when I got the reading list, to send me to Mexico, Shakespeare, etc., a few books in German. So this time that I studied there was so intense, because I had to read all these dramas and then write essays on them and go through the whole fabric of it. And what we learned was, amongst many things, what is the fabric of such a drama? How is the orchestration, the dramaturgy? How are the characters presented? And when is there a climax, a dissolution? And the energetics of it, basically. And this is what, when I came back to Berlin after being in Mexico and started to work with sound and meditation, this is how we created those sound experiences based on the texture of a traditional drama. We had a violinist and cellist and incredible singers. This is what we're still doing. We don't follow strictly these 4 acts anymore like we did in the beginning, but this was really the way how it all started. And also later in Mexico, traveling, I explored family constellation back in the day, like 2013, and went to many schools of that. And I realized, wow, this as well brings together drama, the performative, the magic, the unseen, the relational. And so I think it's a great thing to study.
I think for people who've been to Oaxaca, they like it. It is a very magical place. I mean, it's very colorful. It really is a mix of a lot of different traditions. It's situated in a very beautiful place. It has a very strong, like indigenous feel to it. That there are a lot of people who still carry very strongly their cultures, their traditions there. Was there something in Oaxaca that began to spark an interest in these more kind of indigenous traditions? Was there something that stood out, or just kind of the feel of the place in general? You started to kind of feel there was something very important there?
Yeah, I think it was just being in this cultural field for, it was only months, but for an 18-year-old, a month on one's own in a different country is very impactful. We also then, or I met people there, made friends, and we went to Mexico City, to Teotihuacan, the pyramids, yeah, in Tenochtitlan or Mexico City. And experiencing this, I think, was definitely what, yeah, just anchored this whole magnetism towards these ancient ways so deeply in me that when coming back, I kind of redirected everything, and I was very clear on, yeah, where my interest resides. It needed some time because I was 18, and then when I came back in the beginning of my 20s to study there, it was very clear this is the direction that I want to go. I need to explore these ways. And yeah, I was looking for my, I guess, not mentally, but now looking back, like finding my access point to these worlds, to have a genuine way. And in the beginning, it was the writing. And later, after, yeah, living in Mexico, it started to be this kind of ritual, meditative, yeah, designing of experiences.
You mentioned the pyramids, and I always find that an interesting thing. Especially I think today, because travel is much more open, and people go to places and you take a photo of something, and I saw these pyramids, but I do think for certain people, places like that, it hits them differently. I think for some people, they feel something very, very special there. It's very much something that also can begin to shift our worldview, shift our cosmovision, that there were, or potentially still are, very advanced cultures, like a very different way of looking at, perceiving the world that's embodied in these structures. Was that something that was quite significant in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And it still unfolds. Like now I went back 2 months ago to Mexico, and people or friends were making fun of me because I was going to the anthropology museum like every third day or so. I always go there when I'm in Mexico, but just being amongst these incredible emanations of that time, carved in stone, and stories and jade and obsidian, and just being in this field and opening, yeah, my perception to them, and starting to create a conversation even with certain deities and yeah, beings, is just incredibly powerful. And yeah, what is part of my work, because I do a lot of educational work as well. I host also online study programs now, because there's so much research and so much I want to share, and so many amazing teachers as well that I have, and collaborators that are coming in as guest lecturers. But what is one of my intentions is to create educational formats where we can really start to open our view to the invisible. And a lot has to do with deconditioning our worldviews, and also with decolonizing our worldviews. Because when we try to, we can go to Teotihuacan and have a great experience and be like, wow, amazing. But I think what is really needed to clear our view is to access it from a different point. And that needs some work that we all have to do. And it's not just easy. It also involves to deeply reflect and be honest with oneself, and reflect on one's own upbringing, conditioning. How do we relate to things? how do we create knowledge? How do we gather knowledge? And yeah, what's our privilege? How do we perceive our surrounding? And of course, it also has almost a political dimension and a cultural one, but a deeply spiritual one as well. So yeah, this is something that's very dear to me, because I feel when we start to, discondition, uncondition, we actually meet these places in a very different way. Yeah, everything changes.
I think for a lot of people, when I've spoken about this, I think a number of times on the podcast, but I think often when we speak of those ideas like worldviews, or cosmovisions, we tend to use them as if like someone else has a cosmovision, like a more indigenous person or someone else has a worldview, and we can look at their worldview and somehow maybe learn something from it or not, or judge it, receive it, whatever we do. But it's usually something that someone else has. I think for many people, they or we don't necessarily see that we also have a worldview, that essentially everything is a worldview. It's interesting what you're saying is that in order to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to see something in a different way, like one, I would have to imagine that we have to be able to see that we also have a worldview. And then also to be able, as you said, to somehow deconstruct that, or to break that down. And I think that's not that foreign of a concept. I mean, if I only speak English, like it would be very difficult for me to understand something that's not English. So first I have to understand that the language I'm speaking has a meaning. It has context to it, and then if I understand, okay, the language that I'm speaking is somehow different. If I want to understand something else, I also have to begin to not only maybe even understand the language, but understand a lot more that comes with that. Why do you think that's so important, as you say, to deconstruct our worldview? Because I think some people would also hear that also maybe in a negative way, like why would I need to deconstruct my worldview? And yet at the same time, I think really the essence of any sort of knowledge is in a sense beginning to do that, beginning to recognize something. I mean, even in a more medical sense, like if we want to see the root of a disease or an ailment, like first we have to be able to see it, or something that's good. Like if I want to see what my good qualities are, first I have to be able to diagnose that, to see that, and then something else can begin to open. But I think that's a really interesting way of putting that, of like deconstructing our worldviews.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, you're right. It's a very like strong sentence to come in on, with that topic. I guess the first really incredibly, game-changing moment is when we realize in what kind of worldview are we operating. And worldview or cosmovision really in a sense of how do I perceive reality, symbols, relations to the natural world, to my surrounding. Like, how do I make sense out of this world is already part of the worldview. And when we start to realize that there are many ways that, we inherited, or that, we gathered because of the way we grew up, the societies we grew up, and many things are actually leading us to such a strong form of disconnection to the land, to the living world, to one another. We see that it is highly toxic in a way. Again, a strong word that I don't just want to use lightly, but in a way of so much suffering is created from this disconnection that we're all experiencing. And a great part has to do with the worldview that we inhabit, that we are in, that we are operating in. And in the moment that we realize that, which can be very strong and difficult moment even, or just like something cracks in our in our world or in our matrix or however you want to call it. And I've guided many people through this process of looking into, let's say, a common worldview or industrialized worldview versus, I like to call it, earth-based worldview. You can also say indigenous worldview. But yeah, you start to see the differences, and you start to see, wow, actually the earth-based worldview, for example, for many people, what they also reported is that, yeah, this is what really actually resonates with them and makes them really feel at home and be part of something greater. So I think the first step is really to, look at it, and then later you can start with the deconstruction, not in a sense of just like destroying things or making it, but maybe rewriting it with beautiful things that feel ultimately life promoting. And this is, I feel, a very important key point. What worldview or what ways are ultimately life promoting? Yeah.
I've also mentioned this a number of times in the podcast, but I think that's where something like a cosmovision, a worldview is, like, it really can shape our reality. And an example that I often give is I spent many years living with and studying with a group of people in the Peruvian Amazon called the Shipibo Conibo. And they have a word that's often translated as good, and it's hakun. And the negation of that is ma. So hakun ma is something that's not good. And one of my interviews, I spoke to a very good friend of mine. His name is Brian Best, and he's married to a Shipibo woman. He's a linguist. He has a very deep knowledge of the Shipibo language. And I was talking to him one day, and it really shifted my worldview. And he was saying kind of the deeper etymology of that word. What does good mean? Because again, like, that literally can shape our world. Like, what is good? We just kind of take it for granted. And it was very beautiful. And he was saying that on a deeper level, what that word good means, it's kind of a loose translation, but on a deeper level, it means truth.
Mm.
And I think that's a very beautiful way of saying something. And then he even took it a step further, because often we can say, well, what is truth? That's very kind of subjective as well to many people, especially in this kind of postmodern world where we say things like truth is relative and there is nothing that's inherently true. But on a deeper level, like, what is true, they would say, is that which is life-giving. And so that which is life-giving is truth. And that which is true
Wow.
is good.
I love that. It's fully related to, what I just said. I love to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, right. It's such a beautiful, such a beautiful piece of understanding. Truth is that which is life promoting, right? Mm.
And I often think, like, how that could shape someone's world. Like, every time, if you're speaking about something and you're saying it's good, it means it's life-giving. It means it's unifying. It's creating. And something that's a kunma is something that's separating. It's not promoting that life-giving energy. It's something that's destroying or separating or bringing disharmony, dis-ease. So yeah, I think those things are so beautiful.
Totally. And can I say one thing to
Yeah.
that? What I think is a great example, also talking about people like the sheep people. a clear, tangible example is in those cosmovisions. Humans are seen as stewards of the land, stewarding the land, working with the land, taking care of the land. And when we translate that to the more common worldview, it's like humans are owners of land. You own a land, but many people own lands, but who's really stewarding a piece of land? And that is an incredible difference. And the more people starting to understand that, wow, the greater positive changes can be experienced. And again, right, this is growing up. You might think, oh, I have to like buy something and just own it or whatever. But if you're taught to steward a land and really take care of the whole ecosystem of that little piece of land, and even if it's a 400 square meter garden or so, to just steward it and be there, like this is it. This is a great difference.
It's also very interesting because we would also kind of that idea of different ways of looking at things. And when I started, we would go on these plant walks and with like one of the Shipibo healers, medicine people, and they'd come across a plant, and the guests would say, "Oh, like what is that plant good for?" And they'd say something like it's good medicine. And usually the follow-up question would be like, "Yeah, but what is it good for? Like what does it do?" And in the beginning, like I couldn't understand if they were not sharing because they wanted to keep something more guarded to them, and I think there also was an aspect of that, of this knowledge is quite precious and it's not necessarily just to be shared. But what I also really came to see was it was a mix of two worldviews. Like one, this worldview of many of the guests, like somehow wanting to know very specifically, very mind-based, of like, what is this good for? What are the things that I can write down and list and know on a level of mind that this plant will work on? And it took me a long time to understand that, like, that's one worldview, and it's not illegitimate, but it's a very particular worldview, and not everyone sees the world in that way. And there's other ways of seeing the world where something like saying like this plant is really good medicine is as equal, and maybe even a better worldview of understanding on a much deeper level. And I know that may sound like kind of a silly example, like it's good medicine, but I think there's something very deep and very profound in that, because it's also seen, kind of as you're saying, that things aren't necessarily seen as separate, or that they can be reduced, like that there's real medicine in that plant, and the way it works is vastly more complex and deep than necessarily like it's good for this or this or this. And it also reminded me, because often when we would walk, because it was predominantly an ayahuasca center that I was working at, and people were coming to work with ayahuasca. And it was very interesting because we would see these ayahuasca vines, and people like would kind of assume that they just grew in the wild or naturally, and yet usually there was this sense that it was planted by someone, even in their cosmovision, in their stories, that the vine actually emerged from the body of a man. And in the ayahuasca brew, the plant that's usually used, the chacruna plant, emerged from the body of a woman. But there's this very strong kind of symbiotic relationship that humans and nature are intrinsically connected. But kind of going back to that point is because they actually viewed also themselves as stewards of the land, that it wasn't a chaos. It wasn't just things growing wherever, that there was an order, there was a design, there was a relationship, there was a communion, and that humans and nature weren't separate. They were an integral part of each other. And in order for there to be kind of medicine in a sense, there also needed to be a human relationship in that things weren't inherently separate. And so part of the idea of a medicine person or any group of people is just that, to be stewards of the land, to care for it, to promote it, to use that life-giving energy, to use that generative force so that those things can continue to perpetuate and not necessarily just be taken and used, but that there has to, and that's a very kind of archetypal traditional aspect, is also this idea of reciprocity, of making payments of things. So
reciprocity, the Aini in Indian cosmovision, precisely that was just like around in my thoughts as you spoke, and then you mentioned it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the most important things to understand, I think, when looking at these different worldviews, is that the earth-based worldview is really about relationality. How's our relationship to everything, right? Even when we go into a sweat lodge, to all my relations, and not just my romantic relationship or my relationship to friends or family. No, to everything, even to water or whatever surrounds us, technology, right? How is our relationship, and having this awareness on it, how we relate to things, is a very relevant practice, so to speak. And as you mentioned, it's all about being in that relationship with the living world. And also what you mentioned on how we would try to approach learning about plants, right? Is this, okay, let me write it all down. Let me take my notes so I can gather this knowledge and use it when it's needed, compared to seeing beyond that and coming into relationship with the plant, letting it speak to one, and really perceiving it as a living being in its surrounding, and how it moves, how it relates to the other plants around. And actually, that's why, like, working with our ecosystems here is incredibly powerful, also to decondition our worldview, because we start to see medicine is not only to be found in the Amazon, of course, but exactly here there's even this idea of there's a plan for everything, right? And there are many diseases or diseases that are connected to where they emerged, and then there's also the cure for it. And how do we come back to speaking to our land and our living world? I work with plants as well, like for myself, and of course I create little tinctures and smudging blends and everything, which I also do actually since I'm like 10 or 11, because I had this little herbolaria, like this little practice in my room as a child, creating all kinds of smudging blends, and I still do the same one. So every year I harvest from my garden and surroundings things to use for smudging. And coming back to that is what many people are doing right now, and in the best case, which is happening more, to relate to the living world wherever we are. And this is also what brings us back to our own ancestral knowledge and to our own indigeneity, because we are all indigenous to this world in the end. And also part of my educational programs, or teaching in that sense, is around these topics of not just decondition the worldview and start to come back to a more life-promoting, earth-based way of perceiving the world, but also coming back to our own ancestral roots and anchoring this in our reality, and inspiring others to do that. yeah, and this is also the reciprocity in the end with the other cultures. For example, right now I'm working with a group of Huni Queen women for some time, and they are coming now, and we are putting together a few encuentros, a few meetings, and with people, and moments to explore and learn and be in the space together. And they are equally interested. They want to know as well. And they're like, yes, I really want to have time to also speak, and where you at and what is there to share. So I feel it's very important also to see our humanity, equal and shared humanity, and be in exchange.
I'd love to touch on that topic a bit more. I think before that, one of the things that you were emphasizing, I think is really important, and it's something that I think is often overlooked, and maybe not, but at least in the name, and it's that idea of relational aspects, and I think a lot of people approach these works from a very individual place, and not in a bad way. I mean, ultimately we're born into this world as an individual. We leave this world as an individual. But between those 2 points, everything is relational. And even, even working with plants, for example, I think so many of the common archetypes that people begin to experience are these relational aspects, the relationship to myself, the relationship to my family, the relationship to my love partner, the relationship to my ancestors, the relationship to my work, the relationship to money, the relationship to my mind, the relationship to my trauma, the relationship to my good sides, the relationship to my bad sides. But then, even expanding upon that, like, as you were saying, the relationship we have to water, the relationship we have to food, the relationship we have to the earth, the relationship we have to spirit, and I think these are things we understand on a deeper level. I mean, even in a very Western cosmovision, I mean, we would call this world the manifested world, the world of duality, and that's what makes us alive. Is there's me and there's something that's not me, that I'm in a relationship with, and I think it is such a fundamental part of a lot of these traditional worldviews, is this relational aspect. Is that something maybe you can talk? I mean, you spoke very beautifully about it, but anything else you can share that kind of would resonate to the audience? Because I do think it's such a fundamental pillar in all of these types of work.
You mean to speak more about the relationality?
Yeah, just that idea of us being in relation to everything, to life.
Yeah. I feel yesterday when I was in the temazcal, I was, wow, so many movements inside of me, so many deep understandings. And I think one thing that also came up is something that I'm doing right now very focusedly, is to really walk slowly. Because in order to show up to our surrounding, to our relationships, we must walk slowly. And of course, it doesn't mean to just have an incredibly Zen life and slow walking, but I was even feeling like, how can we see the details? How can we make sure we show up for our people, for our surrounding, if we're all just like running through life? And this year, I personally have really set the intention to walk slower. Also for me, it's the first year after more than 10 years without huge festival performances, curation, production, because I do this for over 10 years. We perform with Sonarero Collective a lot. I hold talks also with wisdom keepers and about my own research. We have Medicine Festival in the UK where I take care of the invited elders and wisdom carriers and perform and do all kinds of things. So usually summer for me is like just like incredible. And now medicine, we are pausing this year. And I was like, great, I actually will not do any festival things and just do everything different and walk so slowly. And it's almost scary sometimes, but it's, wow, such an incredible way to mature in the sense of checking in on where are my responsibilities also as a grown up. I feel this is something very relevant also on the shamanic path, and for those who have experienced these kind of works and moments with good people, it's always like it's your personal healing and processing, of course, and prayers, but it's also a lot of like, what is the space that corresponds to you in life? Take it, show up for it. And that means to really check in on your relations. And for this, I feel we must pause often enough to really do that and show up for it. Yeah. If that gives some answer, just what came intuitively, because I was feeling that very strongly yesterday.
Yeah. One of the things you said, I think you said when you got back to Berlin, you also went back to university and you studied psychomagic. I think you called it. Could you speak about that? I mean, I think I have some idea about that, but it sounds like quite an interesting field, and actually maybe something that's also in a way beginning to bridge these worlds of also looking at these ideas of maybe magic from a more Western perspective, psychology from a Western perspective, but I would imagine it's also drawing on certain traditional practices as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this was back in 2014. I came back from Mexico and I was like, okay, I have to write my bachelor thesis. I was really like overwhelmed. I wanted to integrate all those experiences and my, interests or all these, deeply activated channels and bringing that into the framework of cultural studies at Humboldt University, which is an incredible university, just very traditional, very literature oriented, kind of closed minded in a sense as well. So it took me quite some time, and suddenly I was like, perfect. I want to really deeply go into psychomagic, and psychomagic is a practice by Alejandro Jodorowsky. He was from Chile and used to live a lot in in Mexico and be on all the markets and meet traditional healers and curanderas, but also all kinds of traditions, monks and healers from different backgrounds. And he was also in cinema and theater, poetry, literature, everything. And he created what he calls psychomagic, which are performative acts for individual and collective healing. And I mean, this was back in the 60s and 70s. And very wired into kind of a new form of performance. And he kind of counterculture. Even his cinema opened a new form of counterculture called midnight cinema, because his intense psychedelic movies would be shown at midnight. And he said, or one of his main claims is, an art that is not for healing is not an art. Something around those lines. And also my grandmother, back when I was very young, gifted me a tarot deck. So I was very acquainted with tarot, and Jodorowsky also works with tarot, and he actually renovated the Tarot de Marseille, like doing lots of research to come back to the original printing devices. He wrote also a book about the tarot, and what he would do for many, many years is to sit in Paris in a cafe and receive people that needed help, and would talk to them and use the tarot to kind of create a situation of, okay, this is what you need. And then he would write them a psychomagic act. And these acts are very transgressive. So they're very like pushing borders, going over limits, very intense. Like it involves a lot of nudity, even many times in public spaces, or you can put yourself into, bury yourself or paint yourself fully in a certain color and walk around screaming your new name. So it's about pushing borders and limits. And yeah, so anyway, he would be in that cafe and give people individual psychomagic acts. And then they would perform those acts and come back, and he would gather all this information, later bring it out in a book. So I analyzed that and really went into this kind of healing utopia, or healing idea that he had, which was, yeah, a strong movement counter energy to a very close-minded mindset, and creating new forms of bringing together theater, performance, spoken word, poetry, magic, surrealism, ancestral or traditional ways of healing, curanderismo, and just so many things. So of course, this was incredibly interesting for me. It wasn't precisely easy to present it at university and be like, this is what I want to research about. And they're like, what is that? And it took a long time to find an access point. But I did in the end. It was really difficult, but it was incredible. And I'm very grateful to him for everything that I've learned. That was a very important moment for me. And then later I kept on studying and went into other parts of that reality. But that was a big portal opener.
I think one of the things you work with is this idea of shamanism or shamanic practices. And it was interesting when you were describing your grandmother, you used some of these words like she was a bit crazy, but in a good way. She had depression. She was also a bit of like a kind of almost like a trickster. And these are actually also very archetypal shamanic qualities. It's often one who may be dealing with some illness, even what could be seen on the outside as a mental illness, someone who can fluctuate. Also someone who can carry that trickster energy. That's often a very powerful archetype of the shaman, because ultimately, we were speaking about worldviews, and I think one of the archetypes of a shaman is someone who can shake the worldview of someone, who can kind of shake them out of their variación, as they would often say in Latin America. What does that mean to you, that word shaman? I mean, it's obviously something people are familiar with, again, by name, but I think there's also many ways that people can relate to that kind of world, to that word. But what does that mean when you speak about kind of shamanism or shamanic practices?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very big topic. I actually speak a lot about it in my work. So the interesting thing is the word itself is already very difficult to use, because first of all, it has the suffix of an ism, which gives the impression that there is a fixed form of practice or worldview or just framework. But what we refer to as shamanism is very wired to the ecological world and reality of wherever it is happening. So, and of course, it's a it's a very European term because it was formed basically in the 19th century when, researchers or anthropologists would travel mainly to Siberia and watching what, traditional healers there performing, let's say, just for the lack of a better word, shamanic rituals. They observed that and tried to kind of make sense out of it. And we don't fully know where the word shaman comes from, but most likely it comes from the Tunguisic word saman, which means the one who is getting excited or raised, which refers to the trance practices that are performed for healing. And then that word was being used for this observation and then used for everything that is thought to be like that, and the word traveled around the world. And I remember back in the day when I was just like profoundly starting my journey in Mexico, I would even ask the people that I met that we could call shamans. I was like, what means shaman? And they were like, they couldn't answer that question because it's not their term, right? It's important now. Quite some years have passed and people can use it everywhere because it's an important term that people are like, okay, I understand what you are talking about. So I just always like to give this little preamble because I love words and love, I think you too, Jason, etymology and trying to understand where words are coming from, right? Because they're part of our epistemology, like how we gather knowledge and how we try to make sense out of the world. So that doesn't mean that shamanism in itself doesn't exist. It just, I think we are in a moment where all these practices are gaining so much interest and they're traveling everywhere. So it's a good moment for all of us to check in on those nuances and just trying to understand a little deeper. So there are different words for different kind of archetypes that might slightly differ from culture to culture. But it is exactly what you have also mentioned, the way of shaking the worldview, right? This is definitely a great characteristic. And I think what is really important is that when we refer to shamanism as how it was in traditional shamanism, really traditional shamanism in a sense of outside of industrialized realities and traditional shamanism like in Siberia or even in the Amazon, in comparison to what we could maybe even call neo-shamanism, is to be of service for the community as well, which I think is many times a bit forgotten. And this is where we come back to the different worldviews, the hyper individualization, the focus on the individual in the common or industrialized worldview versus earth-based worldview, focus also on the community in which every individual has a significant role and part. And there are characteristics which are used in the academic world to define what a shaman could be, even with all those cultural differences. But I think what is more key to understand right now as we speak about it is really from which worldview, from which inner anchor does someone operate. And this is where you can very well distinguish in what kind of experience or space you find yourself in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what are some of the traditions that really influenced you? I mean, you mentioned you just came out of a temazcal. I know that's part of your work is bridging that knowledge. sound, I think is something that's very important for you. But what are some of these traditions or ways of being that have influenced the work you do?
Yeah, a lot is coming from Mexico, of course, and where I found also many people on the Camino Rojo bringing together different traditions from the Americas, like really uniting, because we have, of course, North America, like Lakota, then you have things that come from the South, from the Amazon, then you have, yeah, the Maracame, for example, from Mexico. So, and I just mentioned very few, just to give some examples. And yeah, what I like about the Camino Rojo, for example, yeah, is really bringing together these different ways of the Americas and finding, yeah, like keeping the origins of certain ancestral designs alive and clear and safeguarding them. And also at the same time, yeah, corresponding to where we are at right now in life and how we can correspond to, yeah, our actual situation. So a lot is coming from Latin America. Many of my teachers are from this school, so to speak, and from this Camino. So yeah, Vision Quest, Sweat Lodges, Temazcales, Pagos a la Tierra, offerings to the earth. Yeah, I gain a lot of teaching and clarity and practice on this Camino, on this path. But also, I love to work with people from the Amazon, like the Huni Queen. Yeah, with my teachers and friends from the Andes. They're working with Andean Cosmovision. I am incredibly connected to the mountains. So the Andes is like, for me, yeah, really the home of my heart. So also my friends there from the different villages in the mountains have formed or have influenced me a lot. And there you can see all these similarities, and you can see all these different traditions inhabit this, yeah, a similar, a very coherent worldview, because ultimately it's the conversation with the earth, right, where these understandings are coming from. And maybe to say, yeah, to add one thing, is that ultimately when we also speak about, yeah, being in conversation and in collaboration with people from original cultures, a big topic is cultural appropriation as well. And ultimately, even I had a conversation, or I always like to speak about these things with the different wisdom carriers. And once someone told me from the Amazon as well, I think, yeah, it was also from the Shi people. He was like, yeah, please appropriate our worldview. We need you to appropriate our worldview. One thing is to take the patterns and make clothes out of it. Yeah, okay, whatever. This is not so relevant. Of course, we must look at it. I think this is our task, not coming from those cultures. But ultimately, yeah, let's appropriate this worldview. Yeah.
It's a beautiful way of saying it. Can you speak a bit more of temazcal? I did one podcast with a Mexican woman who works with temazcal. She ended up speaking for 5 hours. It was quite a long interview, the
Wow,
longest one I've ever done.
of
Um,
course. This
she works with a lot of medicine, so it wasn't just about temazcal. But um, can you speak a bit about that? I think. I mean, I think a lot of people are familiar with it, but also I think even with some people who are familiar with it, they would maybe also look at it, I mean, maybe as medicine, but maybe not so much also, like maybe in the same way that someone would look at like a Russian banya, or like just something for cleansing the body, like as a sauna of something that has a lot of health benefit. But the temazcal, and I'm certainly not an expert, but it is something that I feel a deep connection to. But there's a lot more to that medicine, and it is something like it is medicine. It is a medicine path, and it's working on not only the body but very much on the mind, and very much on the spirit as well. Can you speak a bit more about from what you've come to learn from that? Like what is that medicine of the temazcal?
Mm. Yeah, for me, the temazcal is really one of the most powerful medicines. And in Mexico, there was like a traditional kind of claim for it is morir para nacer, to die in order to live. So the temazcal is, yeah, a way to come back into the womb of the earth. It's a way to, yeah, pray in such a powerful yet humble way. Instead of sitting in a prestigious cathedral, you sit in the mud in this little hut, sweating like on your knees and just melting in the heat and holding your prayers so tightly that guide you through this experience so that you may come out, yeah, reborn. So of course there are temazcal experiences that are a bit more like wellness oriented, but those are not a real temazcal or a real sweat lodge used as a medicine, let's say, because it is an incredibly strong prayer, where what I really love about it is the design of that experience, how all the elements are present. We have the fire outside, then the stones that are heating up in the fire, and then will be brought into this hut, and this is almost like the semen coming into the womb, which is the uterus, of the earth, where we sit in. Then the water is being put on it. You breathe, you sing, you pray. The air, right? We have the earth that we are sitting on directly. So it's, even like a love making of the elements, and the feminine and the masculine. And the prayers that are shared in there are so powerful, and are really heard by the spirits, by the other people present. And we might go through strong physical experiences because it's dark, the doors, everything is closed, it's incredibly hot, you're in for an extended amount of time, there's not much space, it's really like being in the womb, you're very on very little space. And there is, of course, this moment of surrendering and trusting and holding tightly to your prayer, and being carried by the songs and by this design when it is done in the right way, which is also important to check with whom one is sitting in a proper temazcal. So it's a good work that is being done.
Sometimes many moments of holding on to that prayer.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the whole time. And then you're so in it, you even forget everything else, and you're just so deeply, deeply in that prayer, which can be an incredible experience.
So one of the things you use to describe yourself is like a cross-cultural educator. I think some people use the word like bridge keeper, but I think this idea of bridging cultures, of crossing them, of merging them, almost even this idea we were speaking about earlier of this life-giving energy. It's this generative energy and this act of unionizing things. Why I mean, this may sound like a silly question, but why is that important, and why especially in the time we're living in do you think that's important? And also just for some context, I've studied with a very beautiful man. His title is Amika. He comes from a group of people in the Colombian Amazon called the Tubu, and very interestingly, they say that this time that we're living in, and it was interesting because as Amika recounts the story, he grew up in this very pristine Amazon, and he didn't even know that there was people who looked different or had different hair colors or skin colors or eye colors, and yet he was told these prophecies, these stories that soon we would be entering this time that the Tubu call of the Diro Amasa, the children of the new dawn, and that it was these people who came from all different skin colors, different eye colors, and that they would be able to bridge the medicine of the four directions in order to create a new Maloka, to create a new earth, to create, it's even more than that. It also has this sense of time and space, but it is this idea of bridging these cultures, and also recognizing that every direction has medicine, and that we are entering a time of these bridge keepers, these people who are able to weave these different traditions together. So, just to say that in the sense that even in a lot of traditional or indigenous societies, this was also something that was spoken about. From your perspective, why do you think that is, in a way, medicine or important in this time that we're living in?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, I can relate to what you just said. Many original cultures speak about also different prophecies, and that are now that we're in this pivotal moment of going through a lot of density and even darkness, where at the same time we're living, in many places in the world, very privileged with access to everything that we need, and yet there is so much happening in the world, so much conflict and destruction. But I think what is so crucial is to come back to these prayers, to these practices, to this worldview, in order to keep the vision clear on what can be possible, to anchor it, and almost like throwing out an anchor that goes beyond the immediate destruction and conflict that we see, and keep that prayer so tight and so strong, and align all our actions, our visions, our dreaming into that. And we need hope, right? We need inspiration in order to mobilize energy and strength and capacities to ultimately get there. And actually, this is where our work with sound comes in, which is a very particular way of using sound, which I think for me also came because of all those practices. When we work with sound and we play live, or we produced an album as well, which is called Attune, which carries the idea of attuning to a world in constant flux, but really aligning and attuning to it in order to envision a collective future. So maybe I can quickly speak about that album, because I feel it shows very clearly what I want to bring across. As the first chapter is called Coherence, and the sounds that I used, the rhythms, the sonic textures, are to connect to the earth. So there's fire, there's drum circles in a very amazing way, shallow nature sounds, vertical waters, horizontal waters, and it's produced very immersive. So you can, when you have headphones on or a good speaker, you hear it, because originally we produced it in 4D sound, which is very futuristic. Anyway, so it's about coming into coherence with the living world, the earth. The second chapter is about the self, feeling what is present, letting go of conditionings and armor in order to open for like a greater opening from the heart. And then the third chapter, which is called, the second is called Revelation, and the third is called Ascension, where we did the work of the first two chapters, and now we open a sonic field to envision a collective future that is for everyone, that involves everyone, that is life-giving, that is inclusive, not just for me and my inner circle, but really everyone, the whole human family and animal world and plant world. And really believing that everything is first laid out in the dream space. The energetic foundations for everything start in the invisible, where we are back now with the invisible worlds, my kind of field of research. And it starts from there. And it's important to inhabit those spaces and to dream beautifully. And sound for me is such a powerful way to do that, because you come into even like an altered state. You come into coherence when we play live or when we have listening sessions with hundreds of people. And I shared poetic preludes before every chapter to kind of set the intention. And then imagine everyone envisioning and everyone being in this resonant field. Yeah, I think there's a lot that is possible coming from those spaces. So, I hope that maybe I gave a bit of an extended answer to your question. But that's why we need ancestral practices. And also what I see in sound and our practice with sound, when I say our, I refer to our collective, Sonarero collective, where I work with other musicians and visionaries. It's about almost creating new ancestral practices that one day will be ancestral, maybe, Not that we started it with that intention, but when I look at it from my lens, I'm like, interesting. Yeah, this could, be a new ancient way one day.
Do you think that's one of the important things also with that idea of like bridging or crossing of cultures is, I think you said very beautifully, like speaking to the Shipibo woman, she said like appropriate our worldview, but because there's also something that I think is what she's saying is that's needed. Like medicine is needed, like medicine is universal. It's not bound necessarily to a place. Like cultures are bound to a place, but medicine, something about that is universal, and good medicine is something that works. I think you can say it that simply. But this idea, it was also something you mentioned earlier when you were speaking about Mexico, that when you went there, like you felt maybe it was still a bit untouched, like these traditions were still solid. They had their traditions, and now when you go back, you kind of feel like that's being lost as the world gets smaller, and people are moving and going and traveling, and that inevitably things do get lost, things get kind of diluted. And so I guess I'm not sure exactly how to word this question, but something along the lines of, like, what do you think is that balance? Because obviously on the one hand, like guarding these cultures, understanding them, like really working with them, really bringing them out. And at the same time, there's the other side of that is as things are brought out, then things will also potentially be lost as other things are brought in. And yet at the same time, much like you also said, it's something that I think many people don't think about, which is this idea that, in this reciprocal nature, like very often these people from more traditional cultures are also very interested in other traditions, other ways of being. Like they're not stagnant, they're not dead. Like that's the idea of being dead. It's entropy. It's stopped. It's stagnant. Like everything. That's the idea of also like a life-giving energy. Is it's constantly moving. It's constantly flowing. It's constantly changing. So I know it's a big question, but where do you see that balance? Because I think it also goes to another very big question, which is this idea that I think you were also alluding to, that in many, for lack of better words, like Western industrialized cultures, even though we seemingly have so much, I think many people really are suffering. And I think a big part is because we have lost touch with our own ancestral roots, with medicine in a very broad context. And so often we do need to look to maybe more traditional or indigenous cultures. And so like, what is that mix? What is that ebb and flow? And do you have any sense of like, of where that's going? And I would imagine that's also a part of your work, like how to do that in a healthy way that's honoring the whole as well.
Yeah, well, so many things to say. Maybe I start with the word medicine because I think you initiated the question with that. Ultimately, what we also really just have to understand is that medicines, and of course, I understood also you referring to medicine, can be sound, can be anything, right? But for many people, medicine means, master plans or certain, substances, etc., that create a deep opening and a deep experience. Creating all these cracks in the very close-minded worldview. They are portal openers. They are can help us to decondition our worldview, of course, and open channels to the unseen as well. But they are not doing the work that we are supposed to do in our lives. The work, the changes is still on each one of us to do them, to implement them. So this is, when referring back to the moment when I spoke about walking slow and really checking in on our relationships and, taking the space that corresponds to us. And I feel this is something very important for us all to understand, because I see also a lot of, overconsumption of those experiences and medicines without any tangible change in someone's life. It's like, wow, how much medicine do you have to drink or intake to get the message? Like, honor it. Don't consume it, right? And ultimately, in the best case, we can really create changes, tangible changes in our lives that bring us to this life promoting and way of interacting with our natural world. And we can fully embody that in our everyday life and can do things differently, approach things differently. And of course, that needs a strong form of integration from any of those experiences. So, and this is the integration. Like even yesterday when I was in the temazcal, and I'm doing a lot of temazcales, and just love this work so much. And yesterday was really a moment when there were just so many understandings coming in, and so much I felt like gifted a lot through that experience. And I was just like, wow, may I have the strength to integrate all of that properly. May I have the discernment in the next days to prioritize integration and showing up for that which has been shown to me and revealed itself. So this is about the medicine. And then you spoke about the correspondences and exchanges with other cultures. And what is really relevant, and it refers back to many things we spoke about, is to also not fall into sensationalism, in a sense of, because I see that also a lot, because I work with wisdom carriers and Indigenous people for over 13 years, and creating these experiences and like with different institutions and festivals, and creating tours with them and for them in a collaboration, sitting on altars and creating moments. We are all human, and in the moment that we sensationalize a certain tradition, we create a lot of distance. We put someone on a pedestal and or we romanticize it as well, thinking, wow, they're so connected with nature in perfect harmony, and I'm not. I mean, I'm so far away from that, so I don't even try. And that's, I think, one of the resulting problems from that. So really seeing our shared humanity and our way of, each one of us is relevant for a cultural exchange and reciprocity, and we cross-pollinate and inspire and weave together when it's done in a respectful, appreciative, not extractive way. Does this give some answer?
Yeah. You use two words that I find are very interesting, and again, they're words that people are familiar with, but I think the way you use them have a lot more meaning, and that's you were speaking about prayer and also speaking about dreams, and I think in a lot of our cultural context, those words actually don't have much power. Like we use them in very insignificant ways, like you would say he's just dreaming, or like you better pray that happens, as if like it, almost like not giving it much significance. And yet you were using those words with a lot of power, that they actually contain real power, that dreaming something into creation, praying something, that there's a real power there. And I think in many traditions, those words do have real power. Can you speak a bit maybe more about like why you're using those words, and what that act of doing those things actually creates?
Yes, a very beautiful question. I really appreciate that one. For me, the work that I'm doing also with the study program that I opened last year called Invisible Worlds, where we have different episodes on different topics, and it's happening online, but people, like, we meet and I share lectures and conversations with different wisdom carriers and then people, and we have like a strong community. It's like a community learning platform, yet everyone is of course in a very individual process and implementing certain ritual practices and even prayer practices in a very genuine way that's very connected to the land wherever they are in the world. And one of the things that I want to really make tangible, not just there but in general in my work, is to reclaim ritual practice and to reclaim prayer. Prayer is not a property of any religious institution. Prayer is an anthropological constant. It belongs to humanity, not to any religion or any dogma. To really claim that back as a way to communicate with the unseen, with our surroundings, with the ancestors, with everything. And again, we are then back in the moment of deconstructing worldview. Which worldview do we inhabit? Is it a one where we think prayer is only done in religious contexts and maybe we don't feel resonance with like religion, and that's why we like don't even go into there. Well, change your worldview, tune in to another frequency, reclaim it, find your own genuine way. And yeah, for example, one of my Peruvian teachers also asked me some years ago, because I sit on altars with him, working with different medicines, especially from the Andes cactus. He asked, why do you want to learn this? What's your intention? And I was like, I want to refine my prayer. I want to practice to use my words in such a way, and to gain as much practice as I can with that. So every temazcal, or every ceremony, or every moment of coming together is such a powerful way of practicing for ourselves, but also inviting everyone around us. And really from that approach, like, let's take out all the woo-woo that we think these things are. Let's normalize it. For example, on Easter, we made a very spontaneous Easter gathering at my mom's house, and suddenly so many friends came, from myself and my sister and friends of friends. We suddenly were 30 people in the garden. We made a fire, and I always do rituals and involve everyone in a way that makes everyone feel part of it, and not like too earnest or serious, but in a very natural way. So there were people that are zero acquainted with it, like the friends of my mother, or different people there. And I gave some tobacco to everyone who wanted to also share prayer, explaining where it's coming from, etc. And then I was like, so Mama, it's your home, you're the host, so the opening prayer goes to you. Are you ready? And she comes with me every summer to festivals and even to ceremonies and everything, but she's not as in there as I am. She's an architect. And she looks at me a bit like nervous, and I'm like, Mama, you are ready. This is your place. You also, it's really on you to pray now. And look, there are all these different generations. You have a lot to share. So I gave her this little, which I love to do for people like in my inner circle, to give like a little positive push and be like, do this, own this. And then she spoke a prayer, and she really doesn't have experience in that sense. And it brought us all to tears, how she spoke to us, to our generation. My mom is in her late 50s, and she spoke about how her generation has fucked up in many ways, and how she wants us all to remain hopeful and in this together. And she just shared such incredible words, and I was like, wow, this is happening when we come together around a fire and ritualize in a genuine way that makes everyone feel comfortable and involved, and there is no one that needs more experience than the other, but let's give ourselves those spaces, and also give all the generations their space of respect, where we're like, you're the host, you're an elder, more or less. Like, speak to us, we want to hear your words. And I see a lot of power in that, and I wish for those things to happen more everywhere.
Yeah, beautiful. So you mentioned this online course that you teach, Invisible Worlds. Can you talk a bit more about that? If like what that entails, like what are the topics you go into? I think many people would be interested also in like how do you how do you teach someone? How do you invoke something in someone that can potentially allow them to access these invisible worlds? Which also, as we were talking about shamanism, I think that's also a very common archetype, is this idea of having a connection to that which is not necessarily of the senses of like what my eyes can literally see or what I can literally touch with my fingers, but something that's also beyond that. And yet, I think for many people who experience that, still very real. I mean, in many traditions, they would say the invisible world is as real, if not even more real than what we call reality. And again, I think that's not, such a foreign concept. I mean, we can't see x-rays, and yet if given the proper technology, we can see them. We can realize that they're there. So they're very real. What is that course? Like what are the practices? What are the things that you use to begin to teach that? Because I think it's a very fascinating idea.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a strong impulse to share more of my research and my practice as well, which I'm always sharing through Sonarero and the collaborations that I'm doing. Yet to really have kind of a container for deepened studies and inquiries and practices. And it took me I really dedicated a lot of time first to feel into what like the essence of my sharing is. And after like a process that I went through also with someone like that kind of helped me to get there, is that it is to enter the invisible worlds and work with them. And suddenly this word just came, the invisible worlds. It's nothing that I mean, it's not a new word, but to make it a thing suddenly happen. I would read old texts and always see how I already like 8 years ago spoke about the invisible worlds, and suddenly everything was falling into place. And I launched it last year after Medicine Festival when I was at Schumacher College in England with Satish Kumar, and who's a peace activist in his 80s, and Elena Norberg Hodge, incredible environmentalist and linguist who wrote this book, Ancient Futures. And when I was with them, I mean, I prepared it with a team, the Invisible Worlds study program, for a while, but suddenly everything was ready, and I launched it when I was there in Schumacher College, which was a great place to do that. And the first episode was on meeting the non-ordinary worldview, meeting the unseen, and shamanic cosmology and practice in times of change. And what I do is lectures on many things that we also spoke about now here during our conversations, just a bit more in depth on certain aspects of it, as well as literature. Not too much, because I like to focus on oral transmission and conversation and experience, but a little bit of literature when it's just the right literature, the right chapter with some context. I love literature, so I love to curate like little Invisible Worlds library editions. I can get very nerdy on that. But then we also have Zoom calls to integrate, to ask questions, and to do certain practices in community. And then people have it unfolds in chapters that either unfold in 1 or 2 weeks. And there are different ritual practices that I explain in videos and in text, and certain guided meditations that I recorded also with sound from Sonarero Collective, always with the intention to enter the invisible worlds and a specific theme that we are exploring from a different access point, to involve the somatics, involve the body, involve the senses, and to come into deeper relationship and communion with the natural world. And then one episode that I always do over the turn of the years, which is something that I've started with my grandmother as well, is to celebrate the Rauhnächte, as we call it in German, the 12 nights. It's something, that comes from paganism of, more like the northern hemisphere of Europe, and especially in German-speaking countries, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. It's an incredible journey between the years, over the turn of the year, where every night of those 12 nights represents a month of the coming year. And I'm doing this, since childhood, and there come many traditional rituals are coming with it, that are working with the natural world when the land is dreaming of in winter, right? So I do this, my whole life, every year. And the past, I think 10 years, I've been sharing it with people. And since we had the pandemic, also online, and what I love about that episode is that I even have people that joined in from Africa and South America and New York City, like all these places that are in completely different worlds and climates, and still we explore the mysticism of that time, of that threshold time together. And I could suddenly see this cultural reciprocity that I always love to foster. So this is the study program, and right now I'm in one where I also have a guest lecturer. One of my teachers, Maria Valdivia, she's a grandmother medicine woman from Chile in her 70s, and this Sunday we have a live call with her, and I'm already a bit nervous. It's her online debut. She hasn't shared online yet. And I'm like, wow, how will that be? How will the setup be? Will she be with her tobacco in front of the computer? Let's see. We are both a bit nervous, but in a very good way. And I'm very grateful for her openness of doing that, because this is not what people like her necessarily do, or that they open themselves to, but she trusts me, and I see the beauty of helping her to amplify her incredible message and be the bridge builder between her and the rest of the world, and helping her to amplify that and giving access to everyone, because I feel very privileged. I guess you have that feeling as well, Jason. Very grateful for these connections that we have, and it's great to share them. And now I'm preparing next study programs with Huni Queen women as my guest lecturers as well. So there's so much to explore, and it's a lot of work. Sometimes I'm like, oh my goodness, it's such meticulous work, all the texts and video editing and everything. Luckily, I have a little team. I definitely need more support. I was praying for it in a temazcal as well, because it's a lot of work, and I have a very high expectation on everything that I do. So, Madre Mia, it's a lot, but I feel very grateful to be able to do this work.
Well, maybe if anyone's listening and they have that expertise, they can reach out to you.
Thank you.
And then maybe the final thing as we begin to wrap up, you also mentioned this sound collective that you've curated, the Sonarero. Can you speak a bit about that, and what is the work that you do with that?
Sonarero formed when I came back from Mexico. When I was in Mexico, I did also yoga teacher training in 2014, and I started to teach. Back in the day, there was the Ebola crisis, and we had a big refugee influx in Germany, and we started to do or form a charity project to teach yoga and meditation in refugee camps, and also gain funds for the Ebola crisis. So there was a lot happening there, and I started to invite others to guide meditations. I felt absolutely not ready for that, and also musicians. And at some point, I stepped into doing it, and this was suddenly like a gate opener for me, because I started to implement the work from studying drama, then my love for music and working with the unseen and exploring the invisible. So I started to work with musicians. And back in 2015, I met Temple Hayes, who's an incredible multi-instrumentalist, singer, by now also voice therapist. And together with a third person, Caio Moraes from Brazil, who was playing at the Philharmonie in Rio de Janeiro. He's a violinist. We started to offer, these sound experiences based on a traditional drama, very dramatic with the violin and the drums and everything, and having these cathartic sonic experiences and ceremonies in Berlin when there was no such thing yet happening. I sometimes was like, what are people thinking of me? Okay, whatever, but it's a bit strange what we're doing here. I don't know, but I love it. Now it's like a big thing, the work with sound, which is amazing. And we were first called, I think, like Music Meditation Berlin, great name. And then we were sitting with, okay, how should we call ourselves? And suddenly I wrote down all kinds of words and cut them and then just put them together. And suddenly Sonarero emerged, which is a fusion of the Spanish word sonido for sound and onero, which in Greek mythology was the emanation of the dream. So, the intention has been very consistent since the very beginning to now, which is to, create sonic textures that help to leave everyday life, consciousness, worldview, and come into the invisible worlds, the dream state, the intuitive realms. So this is what we're doing with Sonarero, and we started to host also 6 years ago educational formats, sound trainings, where we not just teach how to work with all kinds of therapeutic, ancestral, melodic instruments and the own voice, but also how to create fields of resonance in which, this kind of alchemy can happen, and how to hold those energies, how to, weave worlds with sound and voice, and how to learn from ancestral practices and yet create new contemporary genuine forms that are appreciative and that are informed by that, but yet that everyone working with it can really own as well. So this is a work that I deeply love, and we also perform live. And we have our debut album called Attune, which, is this incredible, immersive, almost symphonic musical piece. One could almost call it like neoclassical meditation music. And people from everywhere in the world write me how much they love to work with it, even in ceremony. Like someone that works therapeutically with mushrooms also once told me, like, wow, since you put out Attune, my ceremonies are so, like, I know when I put on Revelation, woof, like he loves to work with it. Many people wrote me that, and I'm like, oh, that's great. It's solid. It's a solid piece of music, and I'm very grateful for people to work with it in their ways. So please have a listen. Sonarero Collective.
Well, Alisa, this has been an amazing and beautiful conversation. We're almost at 2 hours, actually.
True.
Is there any topics we didn't cover that you'd like to share? You feel like we've touched on any or everything for today?
I really loved where we went with our conversation. Thank you for all your amazing questions and the nuances that you touched on, the little threads that you have been weaving together. I think everything has been touched on. One thing that I would like to maybe end the conversation with is just, yeah, first of all, saying thanks to everyone who has been listening patiently and openly, and hopefully there's some inspiration to be found in this conversation, and also empowerment to, follow one's own intuitive calling and to just radically declutter from everything that doesn't feel authentic. I speak a lot in Invisible Worlds with the people that join this program about being radical, in a sense of radically making space to engage with the invisible worlds, because we are just so tightly woven into this dense way of perceiving the world and being someone in the world that we need to be radical to make space and say, no, stop, and now I'm gonna sit with this, and I make space for this, and I take this for real, and I want to learn, and I want to open, and I want to heal. Like, we must do this with a strong voice and with strong presence. Otherwise, we're just like lingering on the surface, and it's not really getting anywhere. And what I also really recommend for anyone entering those spaces is we can drink from many medicines, of course, and explore a lot, but find something that resonates and go deep, because it's in that depth where revelation and real anchoring and real relationship is happening. So equally, how we don't want to spread ourselves thinly with our friends and being everywhere but nowhere really, I think it's great to treat also our journey, our practice, our healing, choose something and create a profound friendship to find allyship in it. And also distinguishing from all the noise, because also in the so-called spiritual world, there's just so much just random stuff, and just, tune in somatically and find the compass. That will guide you. Talking to myself as well.
Well, beautiful. You mentioned the Sonarero Collective. If people are interested in learning more about you or the invisible worlds, or maybe even contacting you, the website, Instagram, what's the best way for people to do that?
So Sonarero Collective can be found on Spotify, and Instagram as well. Also, we have a great website. I will put in a lot of work. So find sonarero.com, SONEIRO. Also, if you want to join any experience, please contact us via email is the best. And follow the journey on social media. Also, my works to be found there, Alisa Reimer. Also on my webpage, there are all the upcoming happenings with different wisdom carriers and things that we do with Medicine Festival and other projects and institutions. We're very consistent in our communications as well, and everything can be found there. And if there are more specific questions also about certain things, you can always write me an email. I'm happy to respond. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Alisa. This was a beautiful conversation, and you have a beautiful presence, and I think a beautiful wisdom that's, I think, very much reflective of the work you've done and the things you put yourself in, and it's a beautiful worldview as we were speaking about. So I really wish you the best, and thank you so much. I think there's probably many more things we could speak about, so maybe one day we can even do round two. But just thank you for coming on and sharing yourself, your time, your wisdom. I think people will really get a lot out of this, and I just really wish you the best with all you're doing. I think it's really important work.
Oh, thank you so much, Jason. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. Time was flying by very quickly.
All right, everyone. That's it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I very much did myself. I think she has a lot of wisdom to share, just a beautiful presence. So I hope you all enjoyed that. As always, if you're able to support this work, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a beautiful way. It's a website. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those things also, those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, to all of the people supporting that way, to all of the patrons, thank you very much for your support. It always means a tremendous amount. And always helping with the algorithms is a really big help too. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the videos. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leaving a starred rating and a short review. So I think that's it. As I mentioned in the intro, if you're interested in working with myself and my colleague Merav Artzi, I believe when this comes out, we're actually already sold out for our retreat in Ireland, but we have an online retreat coming up at the end of August, and then an in-person retreat beginning November 2nd for the month of November. If you'd like more information about that, you can check out my website at nicotianarustica.org. Always there's a link to that in the show notes. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope this finds you all well. Thank you all for the support, and I will see you all in the next episode.